I think that's kind of owning your power. Like, hey, I can help this team by just
Yep.
being better. So like if you're a specialist on something and you're a shooter, like just kind of getting a little swagger about that and saying, that's what I do for this team. I make shots. And so
Mhm.
I'm
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast. This is the podcast where you hear the real stories of people just like you who become extraordinary leaders. You will learn valuable lessons from their lives, lessons that you can apply to become the best leader that you were created to be. When leaders are intentional, lives are changed. I'm your host, Sean Olson. I'm an author, speaker, business owner, and love being the podcast host of the Intentional Leader Podcast. If you all would help us out today and get the podcast out there on the platforms by liking it, leaving comments, subscribing, we would greatly appreciate it. Listeners, you are in for a treat today. Our special guest is Eric Reveno. He is the associate head coach and general manager for Stanford University men's basketball. Coming to us today live from Palo Alto. Eric, Coach Rev, as they like to call you. Great to have you on the Intentional Leader Podcast.
Oh, it's great to be here. Just the concepts we've talked about and touched on I'm excited to dive in deeper and have a conversation about it.
Absolutely. So, listeners, the reason that Eric stuck out to me to have this conversation is obviously this is always about leadership. We're going to hear about Eric's journey, but we're going to hear today a totally different flip angle on the leadership perspective, where it's not about the leader, but it's about you in a different capacity. But before we get into that detail, Eric, why don't you give us a quick walk through your professional career, but more than that, leadership lessons learned in that journey?
I think my early leadership lessons learned were as a high school athlete in Menlo Park, California, just seeing the model leaders in my life. You don't really realize it at the time, but the impact those guys had on me, it was guys in my case, strength and conditioning coach, my high school basketball coach, and the local junior college coach that I got to work out with were all impactful. And taught me about some values of hard work and being a good teammate and such. And so I was able to overachieve as a high school athlete, then play at Stanford and play for two different kinds of coaches. So when I moved on to business school at Stanford, I had great coaches in my career and my life, and that impacted me as a human and as a basketball player. And then I'm at Stanford University for undergrad, then I go there for business school. And at the business school, that's what you study. You study leadership, how to make an impact, how to run an organization, how to make decisions. And I think that really helped give me some structures to think about leadership and to apply it. And what happened for me was I then decided to be a basketball coach. Met my wife at business school. She thought she was married .com, CEO, but she married a future basketball coach and head coach at the University of Portland, where you're learning leadership lessons by trial and fire. And you are making decisions. You're picking who's on your team. You're figuring out the strategy, and you're responsible for the direction the group takes and trying to guide that group. And that's where I really started to understand the value of a good teammate. The impact of a team being a leader is like driving a car. Well, how good the teammates are sort of whether the gas pedal works or not, whether the steering column reacts when you put some pressure on it. The quality of the teammate is really how sharp and how clean that car moves, and that's what they call culture. Leaders talk about building a culture, but if you have a group of good teammates, so. What really, resonates with the stuff that you talk about so much is the leadership and being intentional with that. So I think it's, part of the thing I learned from my leaders that I worked with is the idea, and my experiences is that leaders need to teach people how to be good teammates. So and that's how you build culture, and that's how you build a responsive, effective organization.
Culture drives everything. So I want to dive back for a second because a lot of our listeners have been in corporate America and they're in business. They haven't necessarily been the high-end athlete, right? And so where do you see the parallels between sports coaching / leadership and the corporate leadership perspective? Because I think from my experience, they're actually really tight, but we don't always see that. So what was it like for you? Like as you go to business school at Stanford, you're taking all these lessons as a childhood athlete from coaches. Now I'm seeing the business side. How do those marry together for you?
Sports are easier because the rules of the game are defined, right? You're going to have a score on a scoreboard. We try to help players be the best human beings they can be as well and learn in an academic environment, but you're really judged by wins and losses. And a lot of times in corporate America and corporations, there's a similar score kept, in terms of how you're doing. But you've got to balance that with cohesiveness, culture, and some intangible things that are hard to put your finger on. And though how those things and deciding which of those things drive winning is very similar. So the leader's ability to discern what elements of their organization are critical for their success, and then which are feel good things and prioritizing those, managing that and managing the personalities and how a team gets along and the power of diversity and all these things that you deal with in a locker room really apply to any team anywhere.
They do. Corporate America or anywhere else. And I think we sometimes like try to draw separations, but it's really all the same, right? And so we talk about leadership on this show all the time, and we talk about all the different leadership skills, and it's very beneficial. Your angle is from a different perspective. When you and I originally talked, you were talking about being a great teammate, and you said that teammate skills are not the same as leadership skills. At the same time, being an effective leader is actually learning how to be a part of a team, right? Because we all have people we report to, whether we're the CEO, you have a board of directors. And so we all have that in there. So talk about where you really built this passion to develop the teammate concept and driving that into these players and now into business.
Well, when I was a head coach at University of Portland, I'd been 9 years assistant at Stanford, my first tour of duty here. And then I went off and I was a head coach at University of Portland with that West Coast Conference with Gonzaga and St. Mary's. And we had some good success, had the 3 winningest years in school history. And we were actually ranked in the top 25 at one point. We had done some really tremendous things, and then we dipped a little bit, and then we rebuilt it back up. And then I was let go after 10 years. And looking back on that experience, when you look back in the rearview mirror, I thought about the job I did as a coach and what was required as a leader. And then I thought about how, I was trying to squeeze so much out of a group and really maximize what we got done. And I realized that there was different makeups and chemistries of those teams that made me a better leader at other times. So I was a better leader in year 3 than I was year 5, not because of anything I had forgotten how to do, but because of the guys on the team and the quality of teammates. That there's people on a team that make you a good leader. That understand the mission. They are focused on what they're doing. You say something kind of not wrong, and they keep their skills current and they're ready to go. And you say something kind of okay and not quite on point, but they make it look good.
Yeah,
they make you look good. And so everyone's coached. Everyone's been a leader of a team that makes them look good, and everyone's been a leader of a team that makes them look not as good. And so to focus just on your performance is to lose track of the fact that that the team is what makes a good leader. And so I think it's that is the main thing, is that being a good leader really depends on great teams, and there's skills that you can talk about and be intentional around a good team.
Yeah. It's funny as you're talking about that. I go back, I remember hearing the story about Brad Stevens when he was at Butler, and, Butler made Final Four a few times and things. And all the announcers always said, Butler is there, but they weren't any of the blue chip 5-star guys, things like that. But they said they were his kind of guys. And that was even Brad Stevens' thing about getting my kind of guys. I love your vulnerability, Coach Rev, on saying I was a better coach and leader year 3 than I was in year 5 because of the team. But I think really behind that is, as a leader, we need to understand the type of people that we need around us for us to be successful. And that's what you're saying in that and identifying that. But as a leader, we oftentimes think who we are, not about who they are. But we need to surround ourselves with those right people. So powerful stuff. So I know you came up with an incredible acronym to be that great teammate, the acronym of STORM, STORM. Walk us through what that is.
Yeah, no, I will. I'd love to. First, I want to double down on what you just said there. That was really a good point, knowing who you coach well. And that went after being a head coach at Portland. I went to Georgia Tech for 6 years, associate head coach, and coached Josh Pastner, very straightforward, very charismatic, very intense guy. He has, I learned there, like you're saying, he has a wider range of personality that he can coach with, to coach. So he can deal with like someone you'd quote unquote call a knucklehead, or a little bit of a loose cannon, or a little bit, where he was really good at just kind of taking that kid on and getting in his face letting that kid know he loves them and having that engagement, not being bothered by it, not walking off the floor when the kid was a little bit, not lined up with us as a team. And he was just sort of, he used to say, is he better than his problems? And then, like, is that person better than his problems? And I think what you're saying is you got to understand what the problems are that you are okay with. Like if someone's morally not, if you're dealing in finance and someone morally doesn't have a high standard and doesn't keep up to the character that you need in that position, then you might not be able to deal with it. You might want to go to a movie or hang out with them, because you're not, he's not a bad guy. He's just a little loose on things maybe. But Coach Pastner was really good on what he could tolerate and what he couldn't. And I learned from that. I think you're right, like understanding that. And so that's kind of where I came up with the acronym, like from both sides. It really is, as you set up in the intro, like leadership, this is the other side of the coin we're looking at. It's still the same coin. Like this is just kind of like instead of looking down at leadership all the time, now we're going to go and look at it from the bottom and say, okay, what's the characteristics of a good team that are led well, however you look at it. But it's the other side of the coin, and being intentional about like evaluating your team. You want a team that storms. You want a team that does that has these attributes. And so they show up with positive energy. They walk into the room and they're like, okay, what do we got today? What are we doing? Or they get to a job site, they get to a seminar, they get to a trade show, and they show up with the right energy to get the job done. And it's not just being on time. This isn't third grade. It's not just being on time. It's being the right mindset and with the right objective and prepared. And then the other one that I personally learned a lot about was taking care of relations. So you and I are working together on a team, and there's 5-6 guys on the team, and I'm connecting with, Joe, Steve, and Ann, but not with Bill and Mary. And I just kind of like, what am I going to do with that? Am I going to like invest in those relationships with Bill and Ann, the two I don't get, or am I just going to focus with the guys I like and just, am I going to try to invest in those people, sort of connect there so that there's good communication. So Ann feels comfortable telling me something or whatever, just invest in those relationships. It's not about liking them or whatever. Just about seeing the relationship as its own entity. I even try to depersonalize it. It's not about like that person. It's about like that relationship, and that the smoothness of communication and trust is important.
Exactly. I love the aspect of it's not about liking, because we're not going to like all of our colleagues. We're not going to like everybody on our team. On basketball teams, the guys may not like to do things together for fun outside, but in hoops, you got 5 guys on the court, and they all have a responsibility. They all have a job. And if they don't do their job, we don't look good, right? As an entire team. It's the same way in corporate America. It's the same way in your jobs. And I like your aspect there about take care of relationships. And as a leader, we need to think to ourselves, this is my responsibility. Yes, show up, and I control how I show up. By the way, I got nobody to blame for how I show up, period. I need to show up being ready to go, but take care of those relationships, especially the ones that we don't have great relationships with. Build the relationship so you build respect and you can actually execute together. Powerful stuff.
Right. And that's where the guy who's a good teammate is the guy that really just enjoys everybody and stuff. But we're not always all like that. And so we don't always communicate well with everybody. But so like there's some person that he or she is you just don't quite hit it off with. So don't worry about that person, but like you say, depersonalize it and just make it about that relationship to just try to improve it. And they're going to have a comfort level. They might not tell you about their family that much, or they might share a lot about their family. Just be available to see where it goes. And they might want to keep it on work, but just be cognizant and be intentional of that. The other one, the next one of the STO is own your power. So this is the idea that like everybody on the team has influence. The guy on the bench has an energy when the timeout's called that he jumps up and high fives the guys, and he the guy on the sideline during the meeting is not being, the guy who's not being talked during the Q&A, a guy in a conference room not being talked to, and someone asks a question and he goes, he goes like this, and pulls. That's an energy thing, but it's like you have influence, especially if it's like a guy who's lead of the project. He might be a leader in that situation. Just understand your ramification, the impact you can have at that time. And so like own that power. And for our kids, 18 to 24, sometimes we're talking about social media, like if we win, if we lose a game, and all you do is post your highlights online and how great you did and act like you don't care about losing, then people are going to perceive that you don't care about losing, that's okay. You own that, like you have influence on others. If you repost your teammate who is the leading scorer and you repost them, so it's like the same things. If you give credit to someone in a meeting and say, hey, that's a great point that Joe brought up last week. I just want to, sort of circle back to that. People, you have power in how that's looked upon, and if you bite your tongue on something or you speak up, that's a power you have.
Powerful. Absolutely. And it's, I like how you phrase it, though, just simply own your power, because everybody has power. Everybody has the opportunity to influence, but we've got to own it. Right. And that goes to that aspect of, I remember hearing this story once about athletics, and you've got all the guys that are sitting on the bench during the game, but they're on the court during practice. And I heard it identified one time as being the taxi squad. I mean, we got to work our tails off in practice because we're taking the starters to where they need to be.
Right.
Hence taxi squad. But for some people, if they're on the bench, they're not getting all the game time, they can still own their power to say, I'm going to play these first stringers as hard as I can because I want them to get better. And if they get better, guess what? I'm going to get some PT because we're beating people.
Yeah. And sometimes there's it might be in a corporate setting, we just a small business here basically. But it's like, it's how you respond to an email, like if someone and they just say, oh, Rev's on board with this, versus you're passive aggressive and you're quiet about it, but you're going to support somebody's initiative or how you're going to support someone's initiative. And so that's important. The R, so STOR, the R is raise others up. And this is the idea. You touched on something like we need each other to win, but in some teams a lot like my bonus might be impacted by our total sales number, our total whatever number. And some things are set up more competitive and that's a different environment. But in most things now, we gotta move product out the door. So, so me helping that person get their job done and raising them up and saying, hey, call so-and-so, they'll be able to help you, or I can help you with that, or let's circle back on this. Raising others up and helping them is going to help you, so like the basketball example, if I'm a point guard and I have a big guy that can catch a not so great pass, then he makes me look better, and so like you have a lot of times you'll have a guard throw a pass that's kind of catchable, not very catchable, and he drops it, and then the point guard has reaction because he wants everyone to know that guy screwed up. And this is just in practice. Well,
Right.
if you recognize the opportunity that you could lift him up and help him be better and encourage him and work with them and maybe do some drills with them, then all of a sudden you're going to look better and you're going to have more success, and the team's going to win, and you might be all conference. But like, there's something about a good teammate that just sort of gives up to that idea, that doesn't have a constant scoreboard of, the competitor is great, but being a great teammate, measuring that and trying to help your teammate is going to make you more successful and happy, and the team better. The last one is mission focus. And I think this is important. It's especially important, because the reason I coach is to help players be the best they can be and to win championships. And I think winning is important because it's sort of the iron that sharpens, it's what like having a scoreboard. And we talked about sports and business, the fact that we're going to go out there and we can't push. I tease friends around here in Silicon Valley that can push a product launch back, like, hey, we're not ready to launch this product, we're going to push it back. Right. We don't have the luxury of doing that.
You don't.
Hey, we got opening kickoff. Stanford football plays University of Hawaii and then Miami on national TV the first 2 weeks of the season. That's happening. We got to get ready for it, ready or not, and Stanford basketball will have games. And that's just kind of, so like everyone understanding that importance focuses everybody. And you've got to recognize that as a teammate. And I think as you put these things together, the STORM acronym, and I think we've talked about this, where all of a sudden, if you have these things and you're thinking about teammateship in this sort of holistic way, and you have leadership skills, well, what are leadership skills? Leadership skills are identifying problems, being good at recognizing who's good on the team, and then also developing a strategy. Like like all of a sudden the guy that says, hey, let's run this play. I think this play would be good to run because that guy can't guard Joe. And let's run this player. Let's move into this market. Let's move into this market with this product really first, because product B worked over here, but product A is really good here because whatever reason about that market. And so that kind of guy then that's a leadership skill where you're then directing the group. It's a strategy piece. I think one of the biggest responsibilities, I was talking to a colleague about, the women's water polo coach, is you decide who's on your team. We recruit people, we hire people, and you decide who's on your team. And that's why they're always saying being very thoughtful, being very intentional about choosing your team. And your point to start the conversation about knowing who you like on your team. So now I've gotten better looking at these characteristics, that these are important to me, that someone shows that wants to be better, shows up with the right energy is a really important thing. And so it is having this perspective, this person, if you have this and grow into a leader, you're ultimately a servant leader. That's what they call a servant leader.
Exactly.
You're not coming at it from a leadership standpoint of what do I have to do to lead these people. You start off at a standpoint of I'm part of this team, and then you kind of bubble up to leader, and then you're a servant leader.
Yeah. It makes me think this wasn't one of your players at Stanford, but Braden Smith, who played for Purdue, graduated this year, all-time NCAA assist leader, right? So for our non-sports fans, point guard in basketball has all these assists. And an assist is essentially taking care of your teammates, raising them up, right? Because he's passing it off to set them up for success. Here's what amazed me about his story, and it ties in with this. We know he's the all-time assist leader. We know everybody loved him at Purdue. He made his teammates look better than they were. That's part of what a good leader does as a teammate, right? But what's crazy, I don't know if you caught this interview, Eric, but the NBA Combine just happened. Braden was there. And other players who had never played with him, but played with him during the Combine or on his team, they were amazed. They were like, this guy was incredible. He was seeing me open when we weren't ready for his passes. We didn't know that this was going on. It was so fun to hear other guys saying he was a level up as a teammate, and it floored him. It was a great story.
Yeah, no, it was great. I actually went to the combine and watched those guys, and you see guys sort of trying to find that because it's interesting about the NBA combine is there's college players that are going to make NBA teams that have better players. So, like, if you move into a
Mm-hmm.
new job, you move into a new experience, like, are they going to hire you as like the main sales guy that's going to win everything, or are you going to be a glue guy? We also use the expression a glue guy.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
we'll evaluate our players and we look at the stats to make sure that our eyes aren't bothering us. Because nowadays you can look at a stats package and say who does your best players on the floor do better with?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like if you were doing sales and you send out two people all the time. Well, Joe's your best salesperson, but boy, he works really well when he's with Beth. They got a good rapport. They
Yep.
got a good, they do a nice job together. And she might not have the notoriety, but she's really good, or she's good with whoever. She's really
Mm-hmm.
good setup person. And so that would be the assist, right? Him being able
Absolutely.
to, and I tell that too, because then coaches like myself who make these decisions, like I've had talk to NBA teams about our guards and say, I'll be honest, we had a good team this year, but when you put better players around him, he'll be even better because he's making our guys look good. Wait till he gets to really talented players.
Right.
He'll make everyone look good. So
Yep.
I think that we talk about that. And I think just being intentional as a leader, looking for that skill, it reminds me of our recruiting. Like, we all go for the
Mm.
high score guys, we have a 15-person scholarship roster of scholarships, and it's like you want the highest score and stuff, but to try to identify those guys that will come in and make others better. He's just and we start using not euphemisms, but cliches for these things about
Right.
he's a winner, and so like
Right.
and just and
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I know you had a young point guard at the combine, and I saw the stories that pro scouts really saw a different level of him. And I think it's because of what you just said. He had better talent around him, so he was able to elevate with that because of the way that he plays. So,
yeah.
congrats on how you led him in the last year.
Yeah, Ibuka Corey. He's a really interesting
Mm-hmm.
story. He was not highly recruited. He came in here and he was someone that was focused on being a great teammate, and he led with his ability. But he really he understood that his responsibility to keep working to get better, and he paid
Yep.
attention. He showed up with great energy, focus, and energy, like at a very high level for a freshman. And he was just a serious kid. He was good to be around, but he had the seriousness about him. And he took it upon himself, like he was no excuses. He took it upon himself
Mm-hmm.
to keep getting better. And the thing about it is, I went to the combine, and he had done it since our season ended in around the 1st of April till the combine last week, or more than a couple weeks ago now. He was really he'd improved, because he'd worked at
Mm-hmm.
it. So that, I think that's kind of owning your power. Like, hey, I can help this team by just
Yep.
being better. So like if you're a specialist on something and you're a shooter, like just kind of getting a little swagger about that and saying, that's what I do for this team. I make shots. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to work it. I'm going to keep working on that, and taking pride in that is just being a great like hey, you give me the ball and
Absolutely.
you give me the ball and I'm open. I don't care if I'm open. You give me the ball, I'm going to score it.
Yep.
And he's got that kind of
Yep.
mindset.
Absolutely. Well, Coach Rev, I'd be missing the mark if I didn't take the conversation a different direction for a minute. In the business world today, it's hard to keep people, right? Retention's an issue for all organizations. Employees are trying to go to other companies. They're getting offered more money. They're getting offered more opportunity. They're tired of where they are, whatever the case is. So in corporate America, people are constantly moving and changing teams, essentially. In college, I'm not going to get into whether we like or dislike the new era of college sports with the portal and NIL, but they're real. So the portal says a player can go anywhere that they want to go anytime they want to go every year. NIL, it's about pay, right? And so you can pay me, I can get twice as much at this organization. So why would I come to your organization? And in that realm of the portal and the NIL, or in the corporate world, everybody's a freelancer. They can go where they want to go when they want to go. I know you're a huge culture guy, and that's why you developed this teammate aspect. So I don't know how to ask this the right way. It's going to sound weird, but how do you, as coaches at Stanford, sell the culture that's going to draw that kid in? Because that's really what it's about.
Great. It's a great parallel now, and the world of NIL and portal have made it more analogous, our world more analogous to the real world and corporate world. It used to be that a kid couldn't leave. If he left, he had to sit out a year somewhere, which was
Right.
a deterrent. And now they can leave with no repercussions, and they might get paid more money, big money, at a different place. And there's no restrictions. Some schools are implementing like 2-year contracts with buyouts, and so it's a lot more like corporate America. We don't have that at Stanford. We're not going to put on golden handcuffs on a guy
Right.
to stay multiple years. And we've talked about it. It's not like we're totally above that, but we need some sort of structure in our commitment. We develop a guy, so we talk about it. But the thing that has to keep them is, and we coaches used to maybe abuse that a little bit, knowing that if they treated a kid a little bit, they were old school with the guy, and they were just kind of my way or the highway type with them, that they weren't going to lose them. But now that
Right.
kid can walk if he's not comfortable, and so the key there is I think getting the right people in the room, getting the right people that want what you can fulfill and offer them. So for us, we're trying to lean into guys that want to get better. We got a good coaching staff, experience, that want to get better, and they want to win. They also want to get an education. So if you don't really care about a Stanford education, you don't really think that you're just trying to play hoops and you go anywhere, then okay, that's, again, not that we're above that guy. It's not a bad person, but that stickiness of what your culture is about is weaker. So we want players that want to be good, want to be a good teammate, and want a Stanford education, and trying to identify those guys and then fulfill that promise, right? So what's that want to be better. So we got to be really good in player development. What are we doing with helping guys get better? And that's where these NBA stories in the last couple of years, we've had a few guys come in here that were under recruited and then becoming really good. And they got to enjoy it. You got to have a staff that enjoys it and be fun, but you got to win. The stuff you, as a leader, like if you're giving strategy that's not working, it's going to get, hey, I really like you. You're the best. And I wish you well, but this is my one time at college hoops. I got to go somewhere over here where I can get better. If a kid ever said that to me, I would have a hard time. I would disagree with him maybe because of my perspective, but I would respect his logic. And so leaning into those right things, and still Abuka Corey, we were just talking about him. Coach Smith allowed him to coach him, or he allowed Coach Smith, our head coach, to coach him hard, and so he wasn't having to walk on eggshells around him. And so finding the right people is really key. And then being able to communicate it and articulate what you're about and being consistent with that is really important. But it's still, it's very similar, and you've got to, you got to work at it. You got to be intentional with it.
Absolutely. There's another parallel here, and I want to draw into it a little bit. Listeners, I know a lot of you are in organizations and you want to elevate, you want to get promoted, you want that next opportunity, but it's not always available to you. And so you start to look. And so I draw this parallel, Coach Rev, because of the portal. There are a lot of kids that transfer in the portal for no other reason than they don't feel like they're going to get that opportunity where they are, and they want the opportunity to play, right? So maybe Stanford is a great place for them. They fit with the team, but they're not quite that caliber, so they want to drop a level where they can actually play and things like that. I know our listeners in the corporate world, they want to elevate. Maybe they're not getting what they think is the real opportunity where they are. How do you handle those kids who want opportunity, but it's really not in front of them and not at Stanford right now?
So like the three things, I said player development, win championships, winning team, contribute to team, and then Stanford education. We're committed to helping them get through to their graduation, and so they get that education. So we have had players that will graduate, and we manage it so whether they either redshirt a year or they graduate early, that then they still have a year of eligibility to go somewhere else. And that player development piece, like the joy and peace of mind that comes with knowing you became the best player you could be is pretty
Mm-hmm.
good. If you don't get the opportunity to
Yep.
play, then you're always going to have that regret. So we take that if all of a sudden a player is injured, doesn't develop like we thought, something happened to no fault of anyone's, it's just not
Yep.
working out, then moving on could be good. It's not, but he was committed to trying to help the team win. He's been a good teammate. It may have even been a captain. But he's not playing and becoming the best player he wants. And players have those hard decisions. And again, I appreciate that. I'd like to find a way to help them get their degree and finish their education. But nowadays in college, they can get that degree. So I guess the parallel would be, at what point does that sort of corporate commitment, you stay 3-4 years at a place and you've kind of
Mm-hmm.
committed, and someone's come in and moved, like all of a sudden it's time to sort of, and then like all of us had to make, I became a head coach from Stanford to University of Portland. I wasn't leveling up as a head coach or leveling up. I went, and then try to rebuild a program. And that was a great experience for me as a coach and a leader, that I really valued. And so like those decisions, those career decisions, but as a mentor and a leader of younger folks, trying to help them figure that out, I think your perspective, like there are times where that might make sense. And I think as a leader, if you sort of handle those going out the door,
Mm-hmm.
right, and coming and going the right way, how you talk to them, don't take it
Yep.
personally. They want to get another opportunity. They're not playing. Our head coach, Coach Smith, is great at that. Like he's like, yeah,
Yep.
I love having you on my team. I had a kid when I was a head coach at University of Portland who was just a kid from Spain, and he was great chemistry guy, great glue guy on the team, and great practice. I didn't want him to leave. He was a taxi squad guy for us, and probably always
Yeah.
would be, because he was behind an all league guy, and he transferred down a level. And it made me sad type thing. Literally just, to see Aitor move on. Aitor Subi Sharetta was his name, from the Basque Country. And he was a great
Yeah.
kid. And I still keep in touch with him, but he
Mm-hmm.
transferred and he moved down a division to a good place, a good program, and had good success. And he sort of, was able to find where he was at. So
Yeah.
yeah, perspective.
Yeah, the insight there is really good, though. I like your focus on the player development. So I'll transition that corporately. That's to developing our personnel, right? Expanding their skill set, giving them opportunities. And it's that great debate that always takes place in the business world of, well, what if I invest all my time, effort, and energy to make this person better and they leave? Well, you're not investing your time, effort, and energy in them for your benefit. You're doing it for their benefit.
Right.
You guys have an advantage in college where you're like, okay, we get them for 2 to 4 years and we want to send them out as men, right? Not just hoopsters, but men, because hoops is going to die out. They are not going to. In the corporate world, we need to develop them for their benefit. We may get the benefit in this organization if they stick around. Another organization may get the benefit of it. But leadership's about people. Leadership's about investing in them. And I love your focus on investing in others for them to be the best they could possibly be.
And the thing that we think about, like the corporate thing that we talk about, like, so like if you, even in coaching, like, so we had a coach that left to go to a head coach at a small school, and the small school was saying, I feel like you're just going to come here and like have great success and move on. Well, we laughed. We literally laughed as a staff when we heard this story, because that school has never had anyone have success. They've all had success in their careers. So like that would be the first time they have a good problem. Like we had a play. So Abuka Corey is going to leave early and go to the NBA draft. That's a good problem for us. And I think there's
Mm-hmm.
something about, like if you have a smaller company and you have a reputation for people going there and getting better and having success and helping you be good, and then they move on to more, financially rewarding opportunities, bigger markets, and they can do
Yep.
things. That's a great reputation to have.
It is.
Opposed to a place where people are stuck, and the people like just their careers sort of, and then they lose motivation, and they're just sort
Mm-hmm.
of, they kind of get that lifer mentality and are just sort of clock punching the deal. You don't want people on our basketball team that are just sort of, man, I'm just going to kind of get my degree and just, in some other sports, there's 36 sports here, and they have that issue because we're fortunate that there's a carrot out there, even for the second tier guys like I was, or third tier guys in my case, that go and play overseas, so you get the opportunity to play overseas. So you always kind of have, as a basketball player, you have that, but that's not true in every sport. So if your career starts not going the way you want, then you sort of just start checking the clock a little, punching the clock a little bit. That can be a problem. So you don't want that as a company, or as a team. So you want to invest in the people so that they feel like I'm getting better. I'm getting a lot out of this and moving on.
It goes both directions. We want to invest in them as leaders, and we want them to storm. We want them to be that ideal teammate where they're making a difference. Well, I think I could go all day talking to you about college sports and how this all plays out, but we got to wrap it. So, Coach Rev, we finish every show with the same question, a quick tip question. What is something our listeners can do intentionally today to be a more effective leader?
I would say think deliberately on what are the key personality traits of a strong teammate on your team? What do you look like? Really, like you said, like who can you coach? Who can you like for me, this has really helped me. This STORM acronym has really helped me sort of look at even my own behavior. Like, am I taking care of relations? That's one that I sort of need to sometimes focus on. I tend to gravitate, or I tend to be a little transactional with some people and not really focusing on just that relationship sometimes. But I think as a leader, if we all just sort of think about like, what are the qualities of a teammate? It takes a little bit of humility, like you pointed out at the beginning, because it's arrogant to think you can fix any team. You can fix anyone. Not everyone's capable of being a good teammate. You've got to identify the ones. And even if you have to coach through some weakness or lead through some weaknesses, understanding that this person just has a hard time showing up for things that they don't believe in, and just having those communications. But thinking about those things that matter to your team from that perspective is tremendous.
Great tips. Well, Coach Eric Reveno, it's been great to have you on the Intentional Leader podcast. Thanks for all you're doing. Good luck with Stanford men's hoops this coming season. And listeners, look up Coach Rev, follow Stanford basketball. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Nice talking to you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Intentional Leader podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. Be sure to see the show notes for links to Reenergize Professional Coaching and links to contact our guests. Now, hit that subscribe button so that you are alerted with every new episode of the Intentional Leader podcast.